Do you struggle with feelings of anxiousness and overwhelm? Do you ever wonder how friends of yours always seem to be chilled out and totally relaxed while you look a bit like this? I totally understand. I've been there too. In this video, I will share the 3 things that I took out of my schedule and stopped doing that allowed overwhelm and anxiety to go from here to here. Now, before I share the 3 things that you can take out of your schedule, you first need to understand how I discovered these hacks and why I feel confident that they will work for you too. The first step in my healing journey was simply to get really good at managing the severe anxiety disorders that I was struggling with. And for me, my mental health challenges included bipolar disorder. One of the things that helped me crack the code for how to eliminate these problems from my life once and for all was to keep track of my mood and my lifestyle habits. From these concrete data points, I discovered something very important. As overwhelm would rise, I would see that anxiety would rise or depression would hit. So I began monitoring myself really closely, always keeping an eye out for overwhelm. And I discovered a few things that would spike that sensation of overwhelm, so I stopped doing those things. These strategic lifestyle changes drastically reduced the feeling of overwhelm and ultimately paved the way for me to gain emotional mastery. And you might be thinking, well, that's great for you, but will it work for me? Well, as I have helped many people eliminate anxiety, lift depression, and master their emotions, I've heard time and time again that these are the 3 things that moved the needle the most. And in this video, I'm also going to include a bonus tip to make sure you don't have to keep going round and round the mountain and fighting anxiety year in and year out. So the first thing you need to stop doing. Number 1, stop sabotaging your mind. Recently, my son was filming a movie at our house, and during a break, the cast and crew were hanging out and talking about music. One of the crew members was listing off favorite bands, and to be honest, my kids were pretty clueless to the bands that were mentioned, but I recognized a few from back in my high school days. They were the pretty hard rock bands, the super aggressive sound. So as the conversation continued, I could see this young man was a bit baffled to why the others were not familiar with his playlist. So I had to share. I said something a bit like this. Listen, I stopped listening to that type of music a long time ago because I just don't like the way it makes me feel. At that, another crew member jumped in and said exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, man, all music causes you to feel certain emotions. You have to be careful. Most of us sabotage ourselves. We already feel overwhelmed, and then we listen to music that either gives us too much sensory input, which is hard on the central nervous system, or that music that we're listening to is causing an emotional response that is only making us feel worse. Music, of course, is not the only concern. You should also pay attention to the movies that you're watching and what you're reading. In fact, be aware of everything that is going into your mind and your heart. I like to say it to my clients this way: guard your ear gates and your eye gates. This idea of guarding our ear and eye gates isn't just a good idea, it's a God idea. One of the best verses that explains this is Philippians 4, verse 8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And so we see right here, don't focus on the negative things. Don't focus on the ugly things of the world. Don't focus on the anxious things of the world. Let's focus on whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is lovely. Like, we get to choose what we focus on, what we look at, what we take in. And what is so interesting about this particular verse is this is a great verse to learn and to memorize, but if you look at the context, you will see that what they're talking about here is bringing in more peace and reducing anxiety in your life. So if you start at verse 6, it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." And many times we just look at these verses and we're like, okay, I'm supposed to have peace. Jesus is to guard my heart, Jesus is to guard my mind, and then we don't do any of the practical things that follow in the same passage, like verse 8, which says, whatever is true, whatever is lovely, focus on those things. Guarding our ears and eyes is really a simple hack, but most of the time we disregard this. We scroll too much on Facebook, which just causes more anxiety about what is happening in the world. We think about troubles our friends are facing or feel like we are behind. So stop listening to and reading and watching bad input. You get to choose what you're putting into your mind, and this one step alone will make a huge difference. Number 2, stop cramming. Remember school and that time when you knew the final was coming, but you didn't take time to study throughout the semester? So then you pulled an all-nighter and crammed in a bunch of info. It never really works. Well, we do that same thing in our life. Most of us spend our days feeling behind. Each day we wake up feeling like we simply have too much to do and too much to learn and not enough time. So as a result, when we're waiting for our next meeting to start, we open up our phones and we check emails, or we listen to a podcast while fixing dinner. And what happens is we cram and cram and cram and wedge something into all the nooks and crannies of our life. This leaves you with absolutely no space to think. Part of the reason you feel overwhelmed is that you simply haven't allowed your mind space and time to process all of the information that is always coming in. Not only does this cause you to not feel relaxed, but it means that you never have an opportunity to solve any problems. When you give your mind space, let's say while driving to the grocery store, you take time just to pray or allow your mind to wander, you might actually gain some insight for how to have a tough conversation with one of your kids. If not, you will feel calmer and more peaceful by simply giving yourself time to think and space to breathe. Now, before I share number 3, I want to throw in that bonus I mentioned. I know, I'm a wild one, going out of order. What's going on? Well, it's my video, so deal with it. Now, the bonus is, as I mentioned earlier, overwhelm is often tied in with serious mental health challenges. So if anxiety has become a regular occurrence for you, or you find that you're living in a constant state of overwhelm, you need to be aware that you don't have to live this way. It is possible to secure unshakable peace and gain emotional mastery. Now, in order to do this, you will need a bit more than a few good tips. You're going to need to address your physical health, including making adjustments to your brain chemistry. Because if this is your norm, I can guarantee that your physical health has been negatively impacted. Now, the good news is it's not too late. It's actually quite simple to correct your brain chemistry when you learn how to unlock the body's natural ability to heal, which is how God designed your body. You're also going to need to address your emotional health and your spiritual health. When you make improvements across all 3 of these areas at the same time with the intention of healing rather than managing these problems for the rest of your life, everything changes. If you're interested in that kind of transformation, check out my links in the description below. And now for the 3rd thing I recommend you stop doing in order to reduce overwhelm is stop overcommitting. Now, I'm a big list person. I've tried bullet journals and I've bought pretty much every organizer under the sun. I have 2 strategies that have helped me the most for dealing with just everyday stress and avoiding overwhelm. First off, I like to write things down. When I think of something I need to take care of, I just simply write it down because the brain is not a good place to store things. It's not possible for me to remember everything, and when I try to hold on to everything, it creates tension in my body and my mind that I simply don't need. But when I take a moment to write it down, I'm basically saying to myself, I will remember and I'll take care of this when the time is right. The second strategy I use is instead of trying to accomplish tons of tasks in one day, I decide the top 1 to 3 things I want to accomplish. And this is exceptionally helpful for business owners who always have 200 top priorities for reaching and serving clients. Instead, just choose 1 larger agenda item or 3 smaller ones. You can always add more into your day if you power through those quickly. This will really help you reduce that feeling of there's just too much to do. And here is a small practice you may have missed. When an item is done, hit the button
30-second dance party
and do a happy dance. It may seem a bit silly, but it really does make a huge difference when you celebrate your accomplishments throughout the day. It will leave you feeling more happy and more relaxed. Now that you know what 3 things you can stop doing in order to reduce overwhelm, it's important to discover why you may be trapped in a cycle of anxiety. In this video, I cover how to trick your brain to stop being anxious, and I expose the trap that most of our clients didn't even realize they had fallen into. Without this, it's possible that freedom will elude you. Wow, she can really dance.